called the hindrance originating from misconceptions of objects, for it obstructs the wisdom that functions spontaneously in the world. Because of the defiled state of mind, there emerges the subject that perceives, incorrectly, i.e., the evolving mind, and that which reproduces, the reproducing mind, and thus one erroneously predicates the world of objects and causes oneself to deviate from the undifferentiated state of suchness. Though all things are always in quiescence and devoid of any marks of rising, because of the non-enlightenment due to ignorance, one erroneously strays from the Dharma, i.e., suchness. Thus one fails to obtain the wisdom that functions spontaneously by adapting oneself to all circumstances in the world.
3. The characteristics of beings in samsara. In analyzing the characteristics of beings in samsara, two categories may be distinguished. The one is crude, for those who belong to this category are united with the crude activities of the defiled mind. The other is subtle, for those who belong to this category are disunited from the subtle activities of the defiled mind. Again, each category may in turn be subdivided into the cruder and the subtler. The cruder of the crude belongs to the range of mental activity of ordinary men, the subtler of the crude and the cruder of the subtle belong to that of bodhisattvas, and the subtler of the subtle belongs to that of Buddhas. These two categories of beings in the phenomenal order come about because of the permeation of ignorance, that is to say, they come about because of the primary cause and the coordinating causes. By the primary cause, non-enlightenment is meant, and by the coordinating causes, the erroneously represented world of objects. When the primary cause ceases to be, then the coordinating causes will cease to be. Because of the cessation of the primary cause, the mind disunited from the represented world of objects, etc. will cease to be, and because of the cessation of the coordinating causes, the mind united with the attachment to Atman, etc. will cease to be.
Question: if the mind ceases to be, what will become of its continuity? If there is continuity of mind, how can you explain its final cessation? Answer: what we speak of as cessation is the cessation of the marks of the deluded mind only and not the cessation of its essence. It is like the case of the wind which, following the surface of the water, leaves the marks of its movement. If the water should cease to be, then the marks of the wind would be nullified and the wind would have no support on which to display its movement. But since the water does not cease to be, the marks of the wind may continue. Because only the wind ceases, the marks of its movement cease accordingly. This is not the cessation of water. So it is with ignorance. On the ground of the essence of mind there is movement. If the essence of mind were to cease, then people would be nullified and they would have no support. But since the essence does not cease to be, the mind may continue. Because only stupidity ceases to be, the marks of the stupidity of the mind cease accordingly. It is not that the wisdom, i.e., the essence, of mind ceases. Because of the four kinds of permeation, the defiled states and the pure state emerge and continue uninterrupted. They are the pure state, which is called suchness, the cause of all defilements, which is called ignorance, the deluded mind, which is called activating mind, the erroneously conceived external world, which is called the objects of the five senses and of mind. The meaning of permeation: clothes in the world certainly have no scent in themselves, but if a man permeates them with perfumes, then they come to have a scent. It is just the same with the case we are speaking of. The pure state of suchness certainly has no defilement, but if it is permeated by ignorance, then the marks of defilement appear on it. The defiled state of ignorance is indeed devoid of any purifying force, but if it is permeated by suchness, then it will come to have a purifying influence.
A. Permeation of ignorance. How does the permeation of ignorance give rise to the defiled state and continue uninterrupted? It may be said that, on the ground of suchness, i.e., the original enlightenment, ignorance, i.e., non-enlightenment, appears. Ignorance, the primary cause of the defiled state, permeates into suchness. Because of this permeation a deluded mind results. Because of the deluded mind, deluded thoughts further permeate into ignorance. While the principle of suchness is yet to be realized, the deluded mind, developing thoughts fashioned in the state of non-enlightenment, predicates erroneously conceived objects of the senses and the mind. These erroneously conceived objects of the senses and the mind, the coordinating causes in bringing about the defiled state, permeate into the deluded mind and cause the deluded mind to attach itself to its thoughts, to create various evil karma, and to undergo all kinds of physical and mental suffering. The permeation of the erroneously conceived objects of the senses and the mind is of two kinds. One is the basic permeation by the activating mind, which causes arhats, pratika-buddhas, and all bodhisattvas to undergo the suffering of samsara, and the other is the permeation which accelerates the activities of the object, discriminating consciousness, and which makes ordinary men suffer from the bondage of their karma. The permeations of ignorance are of two kinds. One is the basic permeation, since it can put into operation the activating mind, and the other is the permeation that develops perverse views and attachments, since it can put into operation the object, discriminating consciousness.
B. Permeation of Suchness. How does the permeation of suchness give rise to the pure state and continue uninterrupted? It may be said that there is the principle of suchness, and it can permeate into ignorance. Through the force of this permeation, suchness causes the deluded mind to loathe the suffering of samsara and to aspire for nirvana. Because this mind, though still deluded, is now possessed with loathing and aspiration, it permeates into suchness in that it induces suchness to manifest itself. Thus a man comes to believe in his essential nature, to know that what exists is the erroneous activity of the mind and that the world of objects in front of him is non-existent, and to practice teachings to free himself from the erroneously conceived world of objects. He knows what is really so, that there is no world of objects in front of him, and therefore with various devices he practices courses by which to conform himself to suchness. He will not attach himself to anything nor give rise to any deluded thoughts. Through the force of this permeation of suchness over a long period of time, his ignorance ceases. Because of the cessation of ignorance, there will be no more rising of the deluded activities of mind.
Because of the non-rising of the deluded activities of mind, the world of objects as previously conceived ceases to be. Because of the cessation of both the primary cause and the coordinating causes, the marks of the defiled mind will all be nullified. This is called gaining nirvana and accomplishing spontaneous acts. The permeation of suchness into the deluded mind is of two kinds. The first is the permeation into the object discriminating consciousness. Because of this permeation, ordinary men and the Hinayanists come to loathe the suffering of samsara, and thereupon each, according to his capacity, gradually advances toward the highest enlightenment. The second is the permeation into mind. Because of this permeation, bodhisattvas advance to nirvana rapidly and with aspiration and fortitude. Two kinds of permeation of suchness into ignorance can be identified. The first is the permeation through manifestation of the essence of suchness, and the second is the permeation through external influences.
Permeation through manifestation of the essence of suchness. The essence of suchness is, from the beginningless beginning, endowed with the perfect state of purity. It is provided with suprarational functions and the nature of manifesting itself, literally, the nature of making the world of object. Because of these two reasons it permeates perpetually into ignorance. Through the force of this permeation it induces a man to loathe the suffering of samsara, to seek bliss in nirvana, and, believing that he has the principle of suchness within himself, to make up his mind to exert himself. Question: if this is so, then all sentient beings are endowed with suchness and are equally permeated by it. Why is it that there are infinite varieties of believers and non-believers, and that there are some who believe sooner and some later? All of them should, knowing that they are endowed with the principle of suchness, at once make an effort utilizing expedient means and should all equally attain nirvana. Answer: though suchness is originally one, yet there are immeasurable and infinite shades of ignorance. From the very beginning ignorance is, because of its nature, characterized by diversity, and its degree of intensity is not uniform. Defilements, more numerous than the sands of the Ganges, come into being because of the differences in